up for Scott. Come on, make some noise. Gonna take my moose shekels with me. Best of luck, Scott.
Is that on? Yeah. All right, cool. Hello, everyone, and super thrilled to be up here. The title of the presentation originally was How to Get Off the Fiat Standard, and if you've been waiting around all day for me to hear about how to do that, I'm sorry to inform you that I've changed what I'm going to talk about today. So we're going to be doing something different. And you know, I think with Bitcoin, we can get really caught up in the details of what's happening right now with accumulating debt and currency debasement, and where is this going to go now? And part of what that does is it can create a hyper-focus on how fast things are happening or not happening, and we want to observe things that are sort of relevant to our personal individual realities. And what I want to talk about instead is a little bit of a bigger idea. I think that we are in the middle of, or at the beginning of, what is the most significant intellectual shift in recorded human history. A radical transformation of consciousness. Humanity is synchronizing to Bitcoin. So there are a lot of different ways that we transfer information and ways that we don't fully understand. There was a 30-year study conducted on the Japanese island of Kushima that observed monkeys teaching each other how to wash sweet potatoes. And what scientists found during that study was after a threshold number of monkeys acquired this skill, monkeys on other parts of the island that had no exposure to the training started to exhibit the behavior. Collective consciousness. So this became what was called the 99 monkeys theory, or the 100 monkeys theory. It's the idea that information can be transmitted collectively. And the experts went on to sort of question or debunk this study. But I've observed it in my own real life personally. Last fall, I was attending a Tibetan throat singing workshop. And Tibetan throat singing is not kind of a skill that people can just do by accident. But what is interesting about it is of a certain number of people who are just around or in the presence of someone else who knows how to do it, they will go to bed and wake up the next day with the ability. And in the workshop that I was in, it actually happened to someone. So we witnessed a sort of information download, and it was so cool. And it got me thinking about this idea of what does it mean to be transferring information and ideas? And we do this all the time already using money. Money is a sense-making apparatus. It is a tool that we use every day to make sense of the world around us. We use money as a system to collect and gather information and make comparisons and assessments about things that we're doing with our energy and our time. And the problem with the way we use money is that there are 167 different ways in the world today that people are gathering information and making sense of the world around them. So someone who comes from Central America would have maybe very little concept of saving, and someone from Malaysia wouldn't really be experienced in thinking about using credit and debt. It's just something they don't have. And for those people, it would probably be very difficult for them to understand why we would willingly become debt slaves trying to acquire a house, or maybe even more than one, so that we can all feel like we're getting rich. You can imagine that 167 different regional ways of making sense of the world would make it incredibly difficult for us, sort of at a species level, to have a uniform sense of reality and a consistent set of priorities and goals. So the regionality of money is something that is just absurd in today's day and age. If you think about, not only does our money not work somewhere else, we can't spend loonies in Mexico, but we also understand and think about money very differently depending on where we're from. It's because the rules of the money systems we're using themselves are opaque, they're not transparent, they change all the time. The information that we're collecting using money is like trying to make a judgment on how to build a building with a ruler that you eyeballed the measurements on the ruler yourself. It doesn't make sense. And on some level, I think we all are aware that the apparatus we've been given, we've been adopted into this money system, has a flaw in the logic. And I think as well that in some way, in agreeing to participate in such a system is basically akin to letting someone else make sense of the world for you. And so the act of doing that is basically giving up on the right you might have to audit the sensibility or the rationality of the world that we live in. We're sort of told the rules of the game, and we really just kind of go out and do the best we can with them. And one of the most nonsensical aspects of the way our money works is that our money has no relationship to time. We have a relationship to time when we earn money. We spend our finite time to earn the money that we acquire. Our time is finite. And our time becomes increasingly finite as our life progresses. The older we get, the less time we have. Weirdly, our money during that same time becomes less valuable. So not only does our money become less valuable over time, but in doing that, it's eroding the value of the time that you've spent and the time that you have left. Fiat money compresses time as it loses value, and there's no floor to how small it can compress your time to. And I think we can observe the effects of this in our day-to-day lives when we think about TV shows used to be 22 minutes, and then we drop them down to the length of an Instagram reel. And now people are watching TikTok, and if you don't capture someone's attention within the first 7 seconds of a reel, they're swiping to the next thing. It's because we're feeling the crunch of time. And part of it has to do with this feeling that time is flying. Even our traditional financial system has a term for this. It's the time value of money. And in the time value of money, the fiat way of thinking about this is that $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow, because you would have the opportunity to grow that money. But what we're really saying with time value of money is we need it now, because we need to do something with it. I could have picked any number of images for this, but I think what happens as a result of participating in a system that doesn't make any sense is that we forfeit our ability to audit the sensibility of the society that we live in. And we look at any number of things that just don't make sense, and the way our world works is we don't have a way to really make a difference or a change about it. The output of a system that runs on nonsense would be a world that doesn't make any sense. We don't have a clear set of rules. We don't have clean and uniform information. And I want to suggest that for people who are responsible for making the rules, it would be to their advantage, or if you were making the rules, it would be to your advantage to have a dependency on externally imposed rules, to allow people to help them make sense of a nonsensical world. So what is Bitcoin doing? Bitcoin is much, much more than a monetary revolution. It's a paradigm for us to think about coming to an agreement in an entirely new way, in a way that is consensual, in a way that is based on rules, transparency, auditability. We're learning how to communicate with each other in a voluntary way that makes sense. It's the basis for a new paradigm for making sense of things. And I think that if we think about this idea that money is a sense-making apparatus, it's a tool that we use to make sense of the world, it makes sense that money should have a relationship to reality. The combination of time and energy is what creates a product or a service. It's how we earn money. And so to me, I like to think about money as being a representation of sort of the relationship between these three things, time, energy, and money. And I use my grade 3 math, Pythagoras theorem. It's like the triangle where if you know any length, or if you know the dimensions of two of the sides, you should be able to figure anything out about the third. So if you know how much time it took to do something, and you know how much energy it required to do it, then you should be able to make an estimate about what that thing is worth. And if you know how much energy something took, and you know that its value, then you should be able to work backwards and think about how long it took to do it. It makes sense that money should have a relationship between these three things. And Bitcoin obviously has strong intrinsic relationships to both energy and time. Energy is an obvious one. There's a provable amount of energy involved in mining every block that is added to the Bitcoin blockchain. And we can measure it, and we can see it externally. Energy is the input, money is the output. Time. Bitcoin is a clock. It's a clock that is accurate to the block. We think about Bitcoin being a medium of exchange. When is it going to be a medium of exchange? And when I was thinking about this concept of Bitcoin being a clock, people are already using Bitcoin as their unit of time. And you see people talk about the block height of a significant life event. You know, the birth of a child, a wedding, it happened at this block height. What does a clock do? It's something that measures a linear progression of intervals of something. That's Bitcoin. And the Bitcoin clock is incredibly accurate. We know exactly when the next halving is going to happen. It will happen precisely at the 1,050,000th block height. So if you think about the act of synchronizing yourself to a clock, it's a different clock. It's a clock where the smallest measurement is around 10 minutes. So if we think about that fiat concept of the compression of our time, what Bitcoin's doing is putting a floor on the urgency or the immediacy of how fast your time can be compressed. And when we're thinking about syncing ourselves to Bitcoin's clock, I think it happens in two ways. One is the literal way of paying attention to the time measurements of Bitcoin. But the second way we synchronize to Bitcoin's clock is by doing stuff like this, by consuming each other's ideas. And the act of sharing that information is synchronizing all of us. It's changing our way of thinking and replacing that old way of thinking about things with new ways. And this is something that has changed my life personally in ways I can't even begin to explain. Your spending habits, how you choose to spend your free time, the trips you might take or not take, the people you choose to hang out with. Bitcoin, synchronizing yourself to Bitcoin's clock starts to change your entire life. It lowers your time preference. And this is already happening right now. So the difference is 99 monkeys versus 8 billion people, right? We are coming online, one person at a time, like blinking lights. And it's a process that's going to take a while. But one by one, as a result of stuff like this, we are all starting to synchronize how we think about time, energy, and money. And I like to think about it like it's a software upgrade. The act of synchronizing yourself to Bitcoin is like replacing an old software and upgrading it with a new one. We think about 167 local and regional ways of making sense of the world being reduced down to one uniform way of thinking. The fiat software model runs on the principles that make the fiat world make sense. This is the world that we were adopted into when we were all born. Fiat money runs on greed, theft, and violence. And all we can do as participants in that system is do our best with the information that we can collect using it. So when we swap out the software and start synchronizing to Bitcoin what we're actually doing, we can't help but, as a result of consuming these ideas and information, but exhibit the thoughts and behaviors that go along with it. Consensual, voluntary interaction based on rules and rationality. And this is why I think what Bitcoin is really doing is moving us towards a golden age of reason. A society where everyone has a uniform access to information and a baseline expectation that things are fair. If anyone, I'm sure people in here will have played the Civilization video games at some point. And in the Civilization video games, how it works is you move through the different technological discoveries, and those discoveries unlock future discoveries to enable you to do different eras of development. And I imagine Bitcoin as this sort of thing where if we were thinking about what you would have to unlock, you would unlock Bitcoin to unlock other things that aren't possible now, things that we haven't even thought of yet. Things like, in the short term, an obvious one would be the end of fiat. We can't unlock the end of fiat until we've unlocked Bitcoin. And we haven't unlocked it yet. It exists. But zooming further out, what will it mean for humanity when we've had a reasonable length of time to think in a uniform way, to think in a species-level way about priorities and goals? What will those technologies look like? They will be species-level ideas that aren't possible now. The Kardashev Scale is an idea that was proposed in the 60s by a Soviet physicist to measure what a theoretical extraterrestrial civilizations might be like. And it's a measurement of a civilization's ability to harness energy. And level 1 of the Kardashev Scale, so we're not even a level 1. Level 1 of the Kardashev Scale is a civilization that has harnessed all of the energy available to them on their own planet. And Bitcoin is a technology that can at least put us on the path to thinking about it, to imagining the possibility of quantifying and commodifying all of the energy available to us on Earth. And this is because Bitcoin is our first way to monetize all of the stranded energy out there. The problem why we're not able to leverage that right now is that we still live in a world with 167 local monies trying to make sense of what Bitcoin even is. So if we think about the time scale of a collective consciousness, I think of a way to think about it might be to consider what the lifespan of that consciousness might be like. So a human life might be 100 years. So as humans, we measure significant life events maybe in years and decades. And the next level up of a collective consciousness might be a community or even a nation state. And a nation state would probably measure significant events in decades and centuries. And the next level up from nation states we'll say is civilization or species level consciousness. And at the humanity level, we're probably measuring things in centuries and millennia. So how are we doing with Bitcoin? I'd say pretty good. You know, like if we think about how old Bitcoin is in terms of humanity as a civilization, we're talking about we've been using money. We've been collectively sense-making money for thousands of years. And in 15 years, we've already managed to do this. Pretty good. And so, if this thing takes 50 years or 100, we're moving towards that 99 monkeys moment. There will be a moment in time where enough of us have understood this idea. Anyone can understand Bitcoin with enough time and effort. And so when that moment arrives, and I hope we're alive to see it, but if we're not, just by replacing your own software, we are moving towards imparting a gift on humanity that will be given to every single person that is born from here until infinity. So we're doing a lot more than changing the money. We're changing the way humans think about how to interact, how to be civil, how to think about an expectation of rationality. And then if you imagine what that might mean, what will the world look like if we took all of the broken money problems out and replaced it with an entirely different way of thinking about everything? That's what we're doing. So congratulations on your front row seat for the most significant intellectual shift that's happened in recorded history. And it's my pleasure here to be here with you. Thank you.
That was much, much better. I'm here. That was much better than the fiat talk you were going to give. Really enjoyed that. Well done, Scott. Give it up for Scott. I've got loads.